Ok, bonjour, bonjour, hein? Ici, dans le cours. Oh, wait, this is my English class. Sorry, guys. I forgot for a second what class I was in. Okay, so hi, good morning. This is my English 101, and we're going to do a couple of things today. Namely, we are going to listen to a podcast that a student made. It was a profile, and it was before I assigned it generally to all students in the class. I gave students the option. You can do a written one, or you can do a purely audio one. So let's go ahead and listen to that. She's a freshman student just like you.
As a young child, I always looked forward to the days I got to spend with my grandparents. Most of my favorite memories were with my grandfather, Ivy Dupre Sr. He is a short, stocky man who has salt and pepper hair. My grandfather has one of the sweetest smiles, as I've been told by everyone who knows him, and he has a very big heart. He lives in Berg, Louisiana, not but 5 minutes from my own house. He's lived here all his life. My grandfather is also a U.S. Navy veteran. He served, by volunteering, in the Vietnam War at just the same age I am today, 18. As a child, I always tried to ask him about his service and stories from the war, but my grandmother would try to avoid such conversations for him. This saddened me because I never knew much about my grandfather. About 3 years ago, my grandmother died, which led to my family growing distant. Though we were distant, we still communicated. My grandfather and I were talking one day, and he told me, "There's this group of people I belong to called the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and they hold a beauty pageant every year. Would you like to do it?" And I told him I would love to do it, in honor of my grandmother. Not knowing what to expect, my grandfather was with me every step of the way. During the whole event, my grandfather would joke around saying, "Don't be first, they get the worst," meaning contestant number 1 never wins. Of course, when it came time to pick numbers, I pulled the number 1, and all my grandfather did was giggle. My grandfather was always so sweet, and now that I'm older, I can ask him more personal things, such as his service and his past life. He served on the many different vessels used during the Vietnam War. His first year of service was in 1965. He began everything off with a quick story about a LST, a landing ship transport ship, that got stuck in a reef outside Cha La, South Vietnam, in 1965. He began, "We first shot our guns at with hooks to try and pull the large vessel, but it didn't work. So then the great achievement during my service was when we decided to slice the ship in half and remove it piece by piece. Even after cutting the vessel, it never budged, and so we left it there to rot." As we laughed and enjoyed the story, I asked more personal questions. I questioned him about people he met during his time, and as he began to think, faces started to appear all across his memory. Famous air fighters, Navy crew members, Army, he stated. All are just names now, and a bitter memory. For each man and woman he named, they passed into the next life. He said, "On the day before we were to return to the States, 13 guys were killed, 10 being Marines and 3 Navy." As he sat in silence for a moment, he composed himself and told me another story. "Patrolling happened every night, and my job was to bring the boat back in the morning to retrieve those on land who made it through the night," he said. "If no one made it to the ship by leaving time, I had to leave by myself. Even if they were late, I still had to leave." All the memories of the lost lives and scars have stuck with him forever. According to my grandfather, when asked about how he felt about the war, he would say, "It has opened my eyes to see every pleasure we have here, all of our freedoms." When he retired from the Navy, I asked him, "How does he feel?" And he simply stated, "This, the Navy, is my life. I can't retire from it." I asked him to explain what he meant, and according to what he believes, the Navy, services, and volunteering are his life, forever. He said, "I know your father may not be able to understand what it means to him, but that passion can at least be shared with my siblings and I. The reason he has not stopped volunteering is because he thinks no matter what age, race, or religion, the freedom right we have here in America must be shown and represented. At first, my grandfather was totally against everything that involved the war, which included the Legions. The Legions are groups of veterans who strive to support the youth and other veterans around the United States. The ones my grandfather is in now are all over from South Louisiana to Washington, D.C. Though he was not interested at first, after attending a few meetings, they elected him a position, which meant he had a job to do. When he has a job, he tries to do it to the best of his ability. Whether it be something small, like counting money, or a large role, like being in charge, being the president, it was a job. After his first few months, he vowed never to stop, because the youth needed to see and experience that all groups of people are here to help and support. This past month, in August, my grandfather remarried to a lovely woman named Lorraine, and I couldn't be happier for him. For a man who experienced so much pain and suffering and fighting, he needed someone to keep up, and now he does. With our family growing, that distance between us previously has shrunken, and I hope we continue down this path. He still says, even with all this growth, I will still push you and support everything you do. I'm proud to be your grandfather, and I can't help but say I am proud to be his granddaughter. I am even prouder to say that a man who has suffered and lost so much, but can still strive to keep his dignity and positivity, is my grandfather.
Okay, so here we have an example of a freshman podcast that did not have the same directions as yours exactly, because I didn't require her to get quotes directly from him, so there are no sound bites of that individual. You know, I think that podcast has some issues. Let's go through the peer review. So of course we don't have the written part for this, we just have that audio, and I'll explain to you some of the issues that I had with it. It didn't get a bad grade because, like you guys, I'm still sort of learning how to teach it. So that student used Audacity. It was very audible, no problem hearing it. So let me make sure I'm sharing this with you. Okay. So does it adhere to or otherwise engage with the genre conventions of a profile? Yes. It describes this person who's her grandfather. The main idea, I think, is that he was a Vietnam vet. It starts with a personal anecdote about her having been a beauty queen. Does it meet the minimum length? So it is 5 minutes, so it does. Is it too long? Well, the thing is, this is an interesting one because I don't find that podcast that interesting. So I think she could have cut some parts and made it more interesting, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So I'll explain why I think certain parts didn't really support a thesis of this is a guy who was a vet. Does it supply necessary background information from the written profile? So no written profile. She had the assignment to do a written one or do an audio. She just did audio. It's a little different from yours. The written profile in her case required that she tell stories about her grandfather. She did. We know the background. He's from Berg. Now this is where she told me later some interesting things about him and his background that would have made this profile a lot stronger. Okay, and I'll explain that too. So I'm going to explain number 3 and 4. Is it clear that the author has done extensive research on the subject? So no, there's no research on Louisiana Vietnam veterans in that profile. There's no data to tell us how many people his age and from his region fought in the war. There's no details about why it's dangerous to be a vet and how many people were killed in Vietnam, his age, etc. So it does lack, I would say, extensive research on the subject. Does it include specific engaging details about the subject? Okay, so we know his name, Ivy. She says that. But do we know what he looks like? Do we know much about him? We know she loves him and he's funny and sweet. So there's nothing really to illustrate it except for the beauty pageantry where he's encouraging and says nice things. So she quotes him about, there's a cute little expression about the first is the one you're most critical of. But it doesn't really say that much about him. She didn't tie it together, what that has to do with the main thrust, which is being a Vietnam vet. So is it complex and or interesting? This is what a lot of people do. They love their family member. So it's interesting to them, but the whole life's history, it's a little unfocused and incoherent. That's what I think. And I'll explain why. Does it take advantage of the affordances of its medium? For example, does it layer audio tracks? No. Include ambient sound or music? No. Do these elements add? Well, since there's none, that doesn't matter. Does it work technically speaking? Yes, it does actually play when I try to open it. So that was not a problem. Although that was not a problem in the big picture. At first, I did have trouble getting her to upload a file that was audible. So it should be an MP3 and MP4. You guys, that's how you make it audible. Does it seem relatively well put together? Speech audible? Is the audio quality relatively high? I think it's fine. There's a click and a little fuzz in the background, but I didn't have any problems understanding her. Where's the file? Is it web-based? Is it on Peer's device? How did they share it with you? So she did have trouble sharing it with me. She eventually emailed it after we hashed it out, how to make it an MP3 or 4. What did I learn from this profile? I mean, I only learned the personal things about her, like she had been in a beauty pageant. So I didn't feel like I learned that much about the person. And here's how I know that there could have been something more interesting that she got into. So if you recall me discussing profiles and saying that the person would represent a group of people universally, but have sort of individually specific things that are interesting about them. So in the case of the traffic cop, he's my go-to example for the profile, represents traffic cops who your general motorist is scared of and doesn't like because they're going to get a ticket. What is special about him? It's the fact that he doesn't arouse anger in the people he tickets. So here's what I learned later from talking to the student is that she's actually Native American. She's from Berg, but like the family has roots way, way, way down the bayou in Pointe aux Chenes. And there is a whole history of Native American people serving in the military in different ways and really remarkable ways. So for example, one of the most famous cases of Native people serving in the military is the Southwest Navajo Code speakers. So they knew a language that was their native language, which was Navajo. They were able to speak to each other and send information that could not be decoded by the Germans in World War II. So there's this like rich history of Native people. Why would Native people even feel inspired to sign up and join the army? So in this case, in Vietnam, people were drafted. I don't think we know whether he was drafted or not. So there's just some background. It goes back to the extensive research on the subject. Most people who are drafted, you know, it's terrifying, and especially Vietnam was a very controversial war. It's such an important war too because, you know, ultimately the Americans didn't win, so we pulled out. The Vietnamese won, and there's a lot to be said about that, and it just doesn't go there at all. So it's more like a personal narrative. Now, I understand that you guys are not history majors, you're not researchers, but I think she could have given a little bit more background on why we should listen to this guy's story. Generally, any veteran, it's interesting to listen to their stories. this profile just didn't give us, and often veterans don't want to talk about their time. So that's, I say it's always a good topic to get a veteran, but sometimes they don't want to talk about it because it's difficult. So, you know, freshmen, this is very much your freshman podcast. Hopefully yours will have some of the background and some of the strengths. All right, I want to go on to talk about the rest of our time here in podcast land. So I'm looking at your transcripts, and what I'm learning is that I should be a little bit more specific about what I want. And then I'm looking at that peer review, which is yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So that's not the best peer review sheet. I want to give you an example of a different peer review. The original written profile that I've assigned for many years works differently, but I think this will give you an idea of some directions to go to make your profile stronger. So this is when there's no audio element, it's just written. Okay, so I ask students whether there is a clear and original thesis and what that thesis is. So I think you guys should sort of take note of these things. Everything has to have a thesis. Everything has to be an argument. Everything has to have a, you know, sort of main point that you're getting to. So are the thesis and the paper's argument supported by the anecdotes? So the anecdotes that anecdote means a small story. That last podcast, they gave us a couple of stories about the man. He had lost his wife. He had recently remarried. He was in the Vietnam War. We don't learn a ton about it. We learn that he is part of the veterans community that runs a beauty pageant. So there are anecdotes. They don't support the thesis though. How many anecdotes are there? There were 3 or 4, so that was okay. What is your favorite anecdote? Honest to God, none of the stories sort of hit me. But again, freshman writer, so we're not talking about somebody who's a New York Times podcast award-winning journalist. How many quotations are there? She quotes her father a couple times, so that was necessarily that was complete. Are the sources correctly cited and signaled? Is it clear at all times whether the information, the words are from the writer and the source? I think that that is clear, that we know when the narrator, the granddaughter, is speaking, and we know what her grandfather said. Do we know the name of the person being profiled? Yes, we do. His name is Ivy. Do we know the way the person looks and acts, mannerisms? Not at all. So again, this is a little bit of a failing in doing that profile. Can I picture the person? No, I cannot. I cannot picture Mr. Ivy Dupre of Berg, Louisiana, because there was no description of him. Does the conclusion circle back in some way to the beginning of the essay? Yes, I think it does, because she just sort of reminds us of all the things that he was a Vietnam vet and how he's special to her, and that's why she started. Does the profile represent a greater group of people? If so, who? So it does, because I just talked about that, Native Americans who served in the military. So again, I only know that because I talked to her about the profile and her grandfather, and she doesn't bring it up, and that would have been a really good thesis. We would have learned more about Native Americans generally, Native Americans in Louisiana, Native Americans who served the government. So otherwise, he's a Vietnam vet, which also represents a group of people. Is the paper MLA formatted? So we don't need to worry about that, because this is an audio finished product. However, if you want to start, I'm going to remind you of how to cite. You do need to include the source being the person who you profiled, and I'm going to show you again how you source an interview, how you put that in MLA formatting. What was the most interesting thing you learned from this paper? That profile, I don't know. That's the thing. I didn't learn much. What should he or she expand? So if they were to be doing a revision of that profile, I would say that they should expand the parts about Vietnam. That would have been just to give us a better idea of where he was, how old he was, what was serving like. What else would I like to tell that partner? So my student, I told her, you know, it's the Native American stuff that I found interesting. Okay, so let's just little reminder here that you do need in that profile, you need what's called a works cited page. And I'm going to share again. And so the works cited page becomes really important for the research paper. So this is our baby step, doing a works cited page. And you need to cite your profile. So the profile subject. So let's look at what a works cited page looks like. Okay, so works cited. This is your friend right here, the OWL Online Writing Lab. OWL stands for Online Writing Out Lab. Purdue is a university that is in Indiana, I believe. And so they just provide this great website to us for free. And you can look for all kinds of, they changed it around recently. You can look for almost anything related to writing here. So let's go to down here to research and citation. So that's what we're looking for. Research and citation resources. So we were trying to figure out how to do an interview, and we need to do it either in AP, well, no, I take that back. You need to do it in MLA. In the future, your professors might ask you to do it in a different style research papers. So there's the APA MLA. Chicago English wants you to do it in MLA. MLA stands for Modern Language Association. Okay, so let's just go to the guide, and then we're gonna look up, I don't like the way they've changed the site, because usually I can just do a search. Okay, you can certainly use this to do your citations, but let me just tell you, my experience with using the citation machine is that it's laggy, it bogs down the computer, there's a ton of ads, they're not doing it for free. So why not just get to know how to do it on your own, especially because this time around, we are only doing one person. So interview, how do you do an interview? Let's see. So these are probably all written sources. Okay, and let me see. Because they changed their website, I'm not doing great on finding right off the bat the interview. So sometimes styles change. This is all pretty common, that when you have a academic writing style, you have to be up to date and do the most recent one. So the Writing Lab has changed its website, and the MLA citation, actually, they change. So I'm just going back to looking it up generally. Interview in MLA, boom. Okay, works cited, common sources, interview. Yep, okay, an interview, here we go. So interviews typically fall into two categories: print or broadcast published, and unpublished personal interviews. We're doing an unpublished, right? Because you are doing original interviewing of your person. Unpublished interview. So it's gonna fall into this kind of citing. So you're gonna put the last name of your subject, the first name, you're gonna write personal interview, and you're gonna write the date. And so that needs to be on a page that is by itself called works cited. So you write up on top, I'll show you what that looks like. Super easy, it's its own page. Share. So this is sort of just prepping you for the research paper. And so right now, this Works Cited page, it is not MLA formatted because no matter what, you need to have it be Times New Roman, boom, Times New Roman. It needs to be centered. Then you don't center the Works Cited. You just put the name. So like, let's do me, personal interview. And the date today would be, so MLA has specific ways to write the date. And so today would be the 19th September, 2020. I believe that's the MLA. So let me just check. So, you know, that's all, it's very boring, MLA citations, to make sure. Last name, first name with a comma, period, and date. So let's go back and see that that's all correct. Boop, boop, boop. Where are we? I don't know if you even saw me. Okay, yep. So Works Cited, the name, and this is prepping you for the research papers that are coming up. Okay, so the last thing I want to do with you guys today is to share the subjects of research papers that students wrote in this class to give you some ideas for research. And I'm going to comment on each of these and say why it's a good subject or why it's like not such a good subject. So I'm going to just go to my last fall. So everything in the spring, I don't have a lot of examples of anything. That first podcast was a fall assignment that you listened to today. My spring was crazy, as was yours, I'm sure. All right, so I'm just going to tell you the topics of one class and what they did on the research topic. I'm not going to give you their names, of course, but I'm going to tell you the topic. I'm going to tell you what grade the paper got, and I'm going to tell you whether it was a fruitful topic, whether there was a lot to be said about this topic or whether it sort of fell flat on its face. Okay. Here we go. Research paper topics. So this is shifting away and getting you to think about what you're going to do the rest of the semester research on. And we'll start to talk about where to find sources. Okay, so somebody did a research paper on animals that are in the system, incarcerated animals, otherwise known as animals in the SPCA. And I don't know, this paper didn't work very well. That didn't have an argument. It's just about the SPCA. It doesn't really argue that we should be adopting animals that are from the SPCA. It doesn't really argue that we should avoid buying animals or breeding animals. It just is about animals that are untaken care of. So that was not a great paper. It did not have a topic. Here was one that argued that helicopter parents are bad. So that one was fine. That's a good topic. Here is one that argued that this was a either a nursing student or a biology pre-med student. So this one it got a high score. It was about dementia and how music can help to not reverse, but help people with dementia to function a little bit better. That was a good subject, and she found lots of research on it. Stem cell research, not a great topic because it's very controversial and it's very technical. So she didn't define what a stem cell is up front, did not do well, ultimately changed her topic. So this is the draft one. So you will write your research in drafts. This paper is on drunk driving and how it used to be much more common than it is. marijuana legalization. That's okay. So this was like the hot topic for the last 3 or 4 years. It's a boring topic. Why? Because most states now have some kind of medical legal marijuana, including your Louisiana. So most states have legal medical marijuana, and many states have um, just legal marijuana. You can go to a clinic, dispensary, I guess they're called, and buy it. So what is there to say? If you were a really good researcher, you could probably start to say what are the effects of having marijuana be legalized. But it's almost like this, even though you guys love this topic, just to list the states where it's legal and not really argue anything about that, kind of boring. So that seems to be the problem of the marijuana paper. Distracted driving, whatever you do in your research paper. So the distracted driving papers often turn into preachy. This is why you shouldn't drive distractedly, which I think we know because we are aware of the dangers of it. So like we know that no one in this class or any class is going to say, yeah, I think it's a great idea to text while you're barreling down the highway at 60 miles an hour. So when you're arguing something that everybody already agrees with, not a great topic. So far, I'm not finding great topics in this class. Oh, this was a good topic. Women and depression, why women suffer from more depression than men. That was a good topic. This was a terrible paper. It was about how firefighters occasionally light their own fires. So it was about firefighter arson, which is an interesting topic, but the paper didn't work out because he didn't tell me actually how common is this that firefighters would light their own fire. So had he given me this bit of information and proven that it is a phenomenon, that it hasn't happened like once in US history, then it could have been a better topic, but he doesn't do that. He had one story about firefighters who started fires. So all that to say, like, you might love the topic, as I was saying on Friday, yesterday, that you think that children's sex pedophile rings are on the uptick. I'm going to tell you, because that's been a topic in the past, I don't think in this class that I'm talking about today, not a great topic because you're not going to find much. There haven't been many cases of pedophile children sex rings in the United States. There have been accusations made, but have those actually proved to be instances where children were sex trafficked? Actually, there's like terrifying examples of people getting accused of it wrongly, being put away for it, and they were not children pedophiles. So if you just really want to do that topic, you better have your numbers really it can't be 0.00% of children, 0.0005% of children are sex trafficked. And yes, no child ever should be sex trafficked, but if it's so exceptional that this happens, it's not. Why, if there's like literally a 1 in a billion chance for this to happen, it's not a good topic. That's sort of the way it is with the firefighter arson. Tattoos could be good. Yep. He started the paper by arguing that tattoos do not have public health worries about spreading disease and whatnot. And so we had to shift from that because there are tattoo parlors, at least where I live in New Orleans, almost on every major street. And if they were a huge public health risk, they would not be open. So there are, he shifted it to talk about why people get tattoos. And it wasn't great. Like, people get tattoos because it means something to them, or because they're drunk at the spur of the moment. They decide to get a tattoo. Okay, here's a paper that is on Oprah Winfrey. No, I'm sorry. This is not on Oprah Winfrey. It was about how to define success through many drafts. That became a good paper. Here's one about violent video games, so notice we already had that question come up in the writing prompts. And so at the beginning of the semester, I really emphasized how original questions, original thoughts, original papers are important. So violent video games comes up a lot. I've had many research papers on it, and there's some evidence to say that it affects people's behavior, but mostly it does not. So we kind of already know that, and we already had it as a question that was like it was a fine question for a writing prompt, but maybe it's just that I've read about it too much, so I don't find it that interesting. And coming down the pike here. Oh, this was a good paper. Okay, so it was about pregnancy in Louisiana and some high statistics about women needing cesareans or not living through their pregnancies. And so she did a lot of research and showed that Louisiana has dangerous conditions for women giving birth. So that was interesting, and it was a good paper. And that student was a nurse and wanted to go into obstetric nursing, so it was all good. And last but not least, one of my least favorite topics, which I'm sure that I said to you guys, as I did to this class, abortion is not a fruitful topic because it's almost belief-based. So if you believe it's bad, that's fine. Don't get an abortion. If you believe that it should be illegal, that's fine. But right now it's legal, and you're not going to convince the people who think it should be legal that it should be illegal. You're not going to convince the people who think it should be illegal to change their mind that abortion should be legalized. With that said, this student, by the end of her paper, she was anti-abortion. She said, I acknowledge now, after doing the research, that abortion is legal and safe. I'm still against it. So, she got very clear on how she sees that topic. I would prefer, if you do not write about abortion or gun control, things that like you already know where you stand on it and you are not going to change your mind. If you don't know where you stand on something, then it's better. But like if you're going to get in this research paper in order to drive home your point, then don't do that. No one wants to be preached at. You go to church on Sunday to get your spiritual guidance. You don't get it from research papers. Okay, so I'm going to end class there. And hopefully that podcast that had no bells and whistles, the first thing we did was listen to just a student reading their profile. That should give you some ideas about what you want your profile to sound like. And hopefully going over the written profile peer review will help stimulate your profile. As I keep saying, it should argue something. It should argue something about this person. It should represent a group of people, but that profile topic should have some special element to them. Finally, we talked about research topics, which at this point, you should only be thinking about them. Don't choose one. We're going to do a whole lot of exercises around choosing a good research paper topic, because even though I told this class, like, abortion is not a great topic, 2 students that semester wrote about abortion. So see you guys on Monday, and we'll do a little bit more fine-tuning of the podcast and what it should be like and how peer review went. All right. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.